Imagine spending 6 years insisting someone is irrelevant, only to wake up one morning and publish an article begging them to come back. That, ladies and gentlemen, is where we are now. The same British media ecosystem that spent years telling us Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, were a disaster to the monarchy is suddenly producing articles that read like a regret-filled text message sent at 2 a.m. "We miss you. You were actually great. We could have used your help. You should come back." It is one of the most spectacular plot twists in modern royal commentary. And honestly, the irony deserves a standing ovation. Because for years, we were told Harry and Meghan were the problem. Every headline, every panel discussion, every anonymous palace source, every royal commentator who somehow knows exactly what every member of the royal family is thinking, despite apparently never being invited to dinner. The message was always the same. The couple leaves, years pass, and suddenly the conversation becomes, actually, we could really use Harry and Meghan right now. I'm sorry, what? Did I miss an episode? Did somebody accidentally replace the script? Because this feels like watching a football manager spend years telling fans a star player was overrated, only to finish bottom of the league and announce, in hindsight, he was rather useful. No kidding. The article itself is fascinating because it accidentally says the quiet part out loud. The author openly admits Harry and Meghan were an asset. You don't write opinion pieces about how terrible someone was and then immediately explain why they would strengthen the institution. That's not how logic works. Then again, logic has never exactly been the royal media's strongest department. This is an industry that can publish 3 articles in one day claiming Harry is desperate to return, desperate to stay away, and desperate to do both simultaneously. At that point, we're not dealing with journalism, we're dealing with quantum mechanics. Harry exists in all states at once until someone clicks the headline. The article acknowledges something Sussex supporters have been saying for years. Harry and Meghan connected with people. This should not be controversial. It should be obvious. Look back at 2018. Their wedding attracted global attention. People who had never cared about royal news suddenly cared. Young people paid attention. International audiences paid attention. Communities that rarely saw themselves reflected in royal coverage paid attention. The energy was undeniable. The excitement was real. The enthusiasm was global. And what happened next? Instead of building on that momentum, certain sections of the media spent years trying to convince the public that everything was actually terrible. Imagine being handed a winning lottery ticket and deciding to set it on fire. That is roughly the strategic brilliance we witnessed. The article also points out something else. The monarchy is running out of working royals. Now that's an awkward conversation, because when Harry and Meghan left, many commentators acted as though the institution would barely notice. The machine would keep running, everything would be fine, no problem, no loss, nothing to see here. Fast forward several years, the workload remains, the calendar remains, the expectations remain. The number of working royals shrinks, and suddenly people are looking around asking, wouldn't it be nice if we had 2 energetic, globally recognized figures helping out? One section that made me laugh was the acknowledgement of Harry and Meghan's charitable work. Remember all those predictions? The Sussexes would fail, the Sussexes would disappear, the Sussexes would become irrelevant. The Sussexes would run out of opportunities. The Sussexes would fade into obscurity. Years later, they're still here, still working, still advocating, still fundraising, still launching initiatives, still appearing at events, still generating headlines, still occupying an astonishing amount of mental real estate inside the heads of people who claim not to care about them. The amount of attention devoted to Harry and Meghan by people who insist they're irrelevant could power a small city. Then we arrive at perhaps the funniest part of the entire article, the comparison with Prince Andrew. Now we're entering dangerous territory, because for years, Harry and Meghan received levels of scrutiny that bordered on obsessive. Every gesture, every expression, every interview, every outfit, every social media post, everything became a controversy. Meanwhile, the monarchy's most serious scandal was sitting in plain sight. The author essentially points out that public anger toward Andrew dwarfs anything Harry and Meghan were ever accused of doing. That observation matters because it forces people to reconsider priorities. For years, enormous amounts of energy were spent treating Harry and Meghan as though they represented some existential threat to the monarchy. Now even commentators are beginning to ask whether that focus made any sense. That's not a question the Sussex supporters created. That's a question appearing inside the media itself. And that's what makes this article interesting. It isn't just positive, it's reflective. It sounds like someone looking back and realizing that perhaps things didn't need to unfold this way. But here's where the article completely loses me. The headline insists Harry and Meghan must return as working royals. Must? Why? From whose perspective? The article spends hundreds of words explaining why the monarchy would benefit. Fair enough. But where is the section explaining why Harry and Meghan would benefit? That's where the argument falls apart. Let's think about it. Why would Meghan return to an environment where every minor action became a national debate? Why would she volunteer for another round of endless commentary from people who had already decided who she was before she spoke? Why would Harry return to an arrangement he repeatedly described as deeply unhappy? Why would either of them willingly walk back into a situation they spent years trying to escape? The article never answers that, because it can't. It assumes that because the monarchy would gain something, Harry and Meghan should automatically agree. That's not how life works. People don't owe institutions their happiness. Institutions exist to serve people, not the other way around. And perhaps that's the biggest shift we've seen since 2020. Harry and Meghan chose themselves. That decision horrified some people, because royal culture often expects sacrifice. Duty, endurance, silence, stay put, keep smiling, don't complain, don't leave. Harry and Meghan looked at that arrangement and said, no. Whether people agree with the decision or not, that's what happened. And years later, the fact that commentators are still debating it suggests something important. The departure mattered. A lot. If Harry and Meghan truly didn't matter, nobody would still be talking about them. Nobody would still be writing opinion pieces. Nobody would still be debating their impact. Nobody would still be wondering what might have been. Yet, here we are, 6 years later, still talking, still analyzing, still speculating, still writing articles about how valuable they were. The truth is hidden inside the article itself. The author doesn't actually miss Harry and Meghan because they're royal. The author misses them because they were effective. And perhaps that's why these kinds of articles keep appearing. Not because Harry and Meghan are coming back, not because reconciliation is around the corner, not because some grand royal reunion is imminent, but because reality has made something difficult to ignore. The monarchy lost 2 people who brought something unique. Years of attacks did not erase that fact. Years of criticism did not erase that fact. Years of headlines did not erase that fact. In some ways, the constant effort to diminish Harry and Meghan may have accidentally highlighted their significance. After all, nobody spends 6 years obsessing over people who don't matter. Nobody writes endless articles about people who aren't relevant. Nobody keeps revisiting a departure unless the absence is still being felt. And that's the uncomfortable truth hiding underneath this entire conversation. The article's headline says Harry and Meghan should come back. The article itself reveals something much more interesting. the realization that they were never as replaceable as some people claimed. That realization arrived years late, but it arrived, and watching certain corners of the media slowly come to terms with it has been one of the most entertaining royal plot twists of all. Because after years of declarations that Harry and Meghan were finished, irrelevant, unnecessary, and forgotten, some commentators have arrived at a very different conclusion. They were valuable. They were effective. They were missed. And now, the same people who spent years insisting the monarchy didn't need them are publishing articles explaining exactly why it did. What's especially remarkable is that this article would have been almost unthinkable during the height of the Sussex frenzy. Think back to those years. There was a period when some corners of the British press seemed physically incapable of writing a story about Meghan without attaching a criticism to it. It became a game nobody could win because the rules changed every single day. And yet somehow, people are now expected to believe that Harry and Meghan should simply walk back into that environment as if none of it happened. That's the part that always gets skipped. Whenever commentators talk about a return, they discuss what Harry and Meghan could do for the monarchy. They rarely discuss what the monarchy, the institution, and the media would need to do differently. Because if we're being honest, trust isn't rebuilt through wishful thinking. Trust is rebuilt through accountability. And accountability has often been the rarest commodity in royal coverage. Instead, what we frequently get are articles that sound like this. We may have spent years criticizing you, but have you considered coming back and helping us? That is not exactly a persuasive sales pitch. Imagine leaving a workplace after years of stress. You finally build a new life. You find a new home. You create new opportunities. You establish new routines. Then one day, your former colleagues call and say, "We've realized things were easier when you were here." Most people would respond with a polite smile and continue driving in the opposite direction. Another fascinating aspect of this article is the recognition that Harry and Meghan represented a bridge, not just between generations, but between different audiences around the world. The monarchy has always depended on relevance. That's true whether supporters want to admit it or not. Tradition matters, history matters, but public engagement matters too. Institutions survive when people feel connected to them. Harry and Meghan had a unique ability to generate that connection, something that reached people who weren't necessarily lifelong royal watchers. That isn't an opinion anymore. It's history. The global attention surrounding them proved it, which makes the media's sudden nostalgia even more amusing. Because for years, certain commentators seemed determined to convince audiences that Harry and Meghan's popularity was either exaggerated or meaningless. Now, those same qualities are being presented as evidence of what has been lost. It's almost like discovering water is important after spending years arguing that rivers are overrated. Then there is the timing of this article. Timing always tells a story. This piece wasn't written in 2020. It wasn't written during the immediate fallout from the Sussexes' departure. It was written after years of observation, years of seeing how events unfolded, years of watching Harry and Meghan build lives outside the institution, years of watching the monarchy navigate challenges without them. That timing matters because it suggests hindsight, and hindsight has a funny habit of making previously unpopular truths much harder to ignore. Reality eventually arrives, sometimes slowly, sometimes kicking down the front door, but it arrives. One reality that has become increasingly difficult to dismiss is that Harry and Meghan did not disappear. For a long time, some commentators seemed convinced that stepping away from royal duties would inevitably lead to irrelevance. The assumption appeared to be that royal status was the only reason people cared. But life is rarely that simple. Harry carried global recognition long before he met Meghan. Meghan had an established public profile before she joined the royal family. Together, they created a platform that extended beyond palace balconies and ceremonial appearances. Whether people support them or criticize them, they remain influential figures. The persistence of media interest proves that point every single day. After all, newspapers are businesses. Businesses generally don't dedicate endless coverage to subjects that nobody wants to read about. The continued obsession tells its own story. If Harry and Meghan truly lacked relevance, entire sections of the media would have moved on years ago. Instead, they remain among the most discussed figures connected to the monarchy. That fact alone should end a lot of arguments. Then there is another uncomfortable truth hiding beneath the surface. The article acknowledges that Harry and Meghan continue supporting charitable causes. That's important because it challenges one of the lazier narratives that emerged after their departure. The suggestion was often that they only worked effectively within the royal structure, yet their post-royal years demonstrate something different. They didn't stop advocating, they didn't stop participating, they didn't retreat from public life. They simply chose a different framework. In some ways, that's what frustrates critics most. Thank you for watching, and Happy New Week, family. Take care.